And then the costume for Maurice, I honestly, it was at first it was just acting. The actor was uncomfortable with being shirtless. you can't always have what you want. So I went for like the tough guy kind of look. So I put a leather jacket on him. I think that's kind of unanimous with tough guy. Also, it was important that the actor was rather large and big because obviously we wouldn't want a small guy trying to come and mess with some other dude who's like way taller than him. And also that he looked older, like shorter hair, facial hair, gray streaks in his hair, stuff like that, just because I wanted, again, that contrast between these are the kids and he's the adult. And even though this whole situation is acting like it could have been between two adults, his appearance and his actions needed to show that he was the adult and Holden and Sunny were the children. And then there was a lot of different shots and point of views that I used throughout the film. And one of them was at the beginning when Holden is laying on the bed, and it's called a still shot, and the still shot allows for the full room view, and they're usually used to slow down and keep a pace. And I wanted that first scene where you first meet Holden just to have a really even tempo and nothing too exciting happening in it, just because it kept the whole film even, and you have a lot of action in the middle, and I figured you should start with a good foundation, which Holden, in reality, started with a decent foundation. He's gone to all these schools, and he should have that solid foundation that's just still, but then it goes into just ruckus throughout the rest of the film. And then also on to after he gets up, and there's a pan over to the door. I used alternating real-time shots, which is like he talks on one side of the door, and then I switch to the shot of Maurice talking on the other side of the door, and it goes back and forth. And then those are just the conversations. And also I wanted it to be that barrier between Holden and the real world and adults. That's why I didn't open the door. I wanted the door shut for that segment, because there's confusion happening with Holden, but also I wanted the contrast. It was really important to make it apparent to the audience that there was a difference between Holden and the rest of the world. So I didn't want any cracks to seep through, and that's why the door was shut, and I used the alternating real time. Also, the over-the-shoulder shots, which I used to show dominance of a character. If you noticed, I only used over-the-shoulder for Maurice, and then the shots that I used for Maurice when Maurice was looking at Holden, for Holden's line delivery, and then I used under the shoulder and backside shots, which is when I was hiding around the bed shooting for Holden, because the over the shoulder kind of, it symbolizes the dominance of Maurice's character, how he's bigger than Holden, and then the under shots show like Holden's just kind of a feeble kid in essence. And then the long pan, which is what I used for when Maurice sat down and Sunny sat down and the first entrance scene, and then I used other long pans. That was important because it gives the idea of the full room, which is the creation of alternate events. So like if Maurice comes and sits down, but you see that there's the rest of the room happening, if you see Sunny sit down, you can assume that she's doing stuff over there, and she's not just non-existent. So it creates like almost a suspended disbelief when you see that she's moved from one side of the room to the other. And that's more of a filmmaking thing, not really related to the book, but I needed the audience to know that there was a whole room happening, and the whole world is still revolving even though this one event is happening, and that lets you believe that when I switch to another character, that it's actually happening, and it's just not jumping back and forth between time. It's all real time happening. And then a short pan, which is what you saw over Holden's shoulder, which is the only time I actually use it. And I used over Holden's shoulder when only Holden was looking at himself, because I think he feels a dominance over himself, but at the same time he really doesn't have that dominance, and that's why I used the mirror to reflect him, because he thinks he's controlling himself, but really he's just controlling what he thinks is himself. And what really is, he can't get a hold of because it's on the other side of the mirror. And that was another reason that I wanted a lot of mirrors in it, because it gave like a reflection and like a difference between the real world and Holden's assumed world, which is the imagination scene. And also I used first person point of view for when Maurice was yelling at Holden, and that's just to really put the audience into the seat of Holden, and I wanted that connection between the audience and what Holden was really feeling, which is a lot like how J.D. Salinger wrote the book. He wanted us to feel what Holden was feeling, so with it we connect with it, and the only reason, or the only way that you can really feel that is if you're put in the driver's seat of whatever is happening. And then I used, for the moving around the room relatively quickly and all the action shots, I used the chaser shot, and that's the best for the action shots and the situations where the audience really needs to be in the action and know what's happening. A lot like the elevator scene when Holden shoots Maurice, I wanted it to be right up close, and even though you might not see things, every item that has relevance or is really important, you see. So I wanted the audience to know that everything in that scene was important, and the chaser shot really was good for that reason. And time? Am I? Okay. So that is the conclusion of the actual film part of, and the more or less IOP. But before I am done, I would like to read to you a letter sent in 1957 from J.D. Salinger to a Hollywood producer, and a kind of fact that I was interested in was that J.D. Salinger refused to sell the rights to the book, and he never wanted it to be made into a movie. So he writes to a man named Herbert, and he says, "I'll try to tell you what my attitude to this stage and screen rights of The Catcher in the Rye. I have seen this quite a few times, so if my heart doesn't seem to be it, try to be tolerant." He goes on to say that no actor can be found that has X, and he uses just an X with quotes around it. And I think X is used to represent what he thinks that Holden has in his being. It's like a special thing that you really can't fill in, because like in math, X can be anything. So anything and nothing at the same time is, I think, what Salinger was trying to put through. Also, he wanted in the book, when you read the book, you have complete poetic license to anything, and you can just imagine whatever you think Holden is wearing at that time, or however you think the line was delivered that he says. And Salinger didn't want to ruin that by letting a director say what Holden was going to say, or have Holden do something that he thinks Holden did in that book, because that would ruin the book for people, because they would watch the movie, and forever when they read the book, all they would think about was what that director thought it was supposed to be, but it might not have been that to one person across the globe. So, thank you.